right. Welcome to the Game Informer Show, sir.
Well, thank you. Good to be here.
Oh my gosh, it's so good to hear your voice. We've missed you. The gaming industry has missed you, Mr. Wright.
Yeah. Well, I've been lying low.
Why is that?
Well, I'm just kind of working on a background project with small. I'm no rush. And, we have 3 kids at home and just, life.
Just life takes over at a certain point?
Yeah.
You want to just walk us through your life these days? It's just a lot of working from home, dealing with family. Are you still going to an office every day? Like, what is your life like?
Well, working on this app that I'm kind of working on with a small team, doing a lot of reading, creative projects, art, building weird things, whatever, enjoying life.
Please tell me you're writing a book. Are you writing an autobiography?
Yeah, I've never really wanted to write a book.
Really? Why not?
I enjoy reading books a lot. I think, if I did anything, it would probably be maybe more of a graphic novel, kind of like Clouds Understanding Comics. I'd like something that'd be a little bit more visual.
Okay. Yeah. Do you keep up with the world of gaming? Do you follow E3 every year? Do you have any interest in that, or is it just nice to be checked out?
I don't really keep up with all the new games coming out and what's happening every week. No, I just play games for fun.
Okay, well, so we moved around a little bit to get a better internet connection, so you sound a little bit better for everybody. It should be stable now. But sorry, so what are you playing these days then? If you have your pick of the litter, what do you choose to play?
Oh, I'm still addicted to World of Tanks.
Really? Out of everything?
Yeah, I love that game just because it's like a shooter for old people.
Oh, you're not still playing Advance Wars every day, like I think you said you used to?
No. I play a few things on my iPad, but World of Tanks is kind of like my guilty pleasure.
Wow. Are you interested in the sim genre? Are you checking out what's going on? Are you playing City Skylines, anything like that?
No, the kids do. So, sorry, Dave, I had to steal your room. But I watch what the kids play a lot. I have a 8-year-old, so I'm totally addicted to Minecraft, and a 13-year-old that's totally into Kerbal Space Program.
Oh.
So I see every little bit of those two,
Yeah, those seem very up your alley. Are you really interested in them, or is it still just kind of academic? You just glance at the screen every once in a while?
Well, I'm amazed to see what the kids are doing in these things. And they're learning a lot,
Yeah, now you get a fresh perspective on, I think, everybody growing up in the 90s and how their parents looked at them playing your games.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be a confusing route for you. So, okay, so you're relaxing at home, playing a lot of World of Tanks. What do you feel like you're trying to get at this phase in your life? What dots are you trying to connect in the entertainment realm?
Well, in terms of the games I've done and what I'm working on now, I've always been interested in getting closer and closer to the player. And so what I'm working on now is very psychological. Basically you put memories from your life into it, and it tries to build kind of a map of your psyche, but in a game kind of format.
And this is Proxy?
Yeah.
Okay, so you want to talk about that team? You said it was a small team, but what is the development of Proxy actually like?
Well, it's a small team of like 10 people. And, we're basically trying to find ways to make it fun and entertaining, to put memories from your life into it, first of all, and then bring them to life. They become these graphic objects that live in a world, and there's this whole landscape that kind of represents your memoryscape. And then from that, we start, looking at associations you have, what makes you different from other people, how you think, general maps of how you think.
That sounds like a tall order. By the way, it sounds awesome. I love the idea of trying to connect your real life to the games, but I'd imagine in today's climate, last couple of years in particular, it's like I'd imagine so many people are going to be like, I've had enough with this social media nonsense. I don't want to tell them even more about my ex-girlfriends. This sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah, the main thrust of it for me is that it's very personal. So it's not even, you can share and you can choose to share memories, but that's very external and overt. Most of it is, just for you. It's like a mirror into your own kind of id.
Okay. And what do you think people will take away from just looking around a room and seeing the objects, or where's the epiphany coming from?
Oh, well, as you start putting memories from your life, I started after I put about 24 memories, it started showing me associations I had that I didn't even realize I had. Like associate my father with Sunday, for certain reasons. And people, it'll start showing what emotions you connect with certain people, what places you connect with certain activities, a lot of different things that you probably don't, when you see it, it makes sense. And it shows you maps of like the people and on a landscape, and the way they're grouped actually makes sense to me. So it's this funny kind of reflection back of who you are at a deeper level that, you see it seems perfectly right. but it's in your subconscious. Basically, mapping your subconscious understanding of the world. It's kind of hard to explain without showing it.
Yeah. When's it coming out? Do you have a rough release frame?
We're roughly looking at about a year from now.
A year from now. Okay, yeah. That's why get closer to the players? Why do you think you're pulled into that?
Well, basically I want to take the player's psyche and make that the landscape for the game. And when you see this landscape and, it's your psyche, this, it totally connects to you. It's kind of eerie and cool in a way. And, with the kind of stuff that's happening right now with machine learning and AI, they're able to look under the hood and find all these patterns in large amounts of data. And applying that to your subconscious, to me, it's just kind of fascinating.
Yeah. So you feel like looking at the industry today, it's like the dots that aren't being connected is kind of, AI learning, more complex tech aspects, and also just the extremely personal. Just those are completely end of the spectrum. That's what you're trying to shove together here?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, usually the AI machine learning stuff is applied to marketing or playing chess or credit card scores, that kind of thing. The human mind, to me, is like the most fascinating thing in the universe, the most complex thing we know about in the universe. And so using the computer is kind of a microscope on that, and being able to, basically look inside of our own heads and see reflections of that in ways we've never seen before. There's something very compelling about that.
Yeah. Well, here you're here to talk about the masterclass.
Yeah.
It's a crazy honor. You look through like just their website alone, it's like, all right, you can learn from Steve Martin on comedy, Scorsese on filmmaking, Hans Zimmer on composing, or Will Wright on game design. That's a crazy honor to be in that pantheon.
Yeah, I was really amazed to see, the quality of the lessons they had there. It was amazing to me.
So they reach out just asking if you're interested, or what was the first discussion about this?
Yeah, they just kind of reached out to me. I guess they had a lot of interest in having some kind of game design lesson, and they asked around and decided to invite me, I looked into it, and it was very challenging, for me to kind of come up with how I would teach game design in one whole chunk like that. I've given a lot of talks, many talks on game design, but usually they're very focused talks on this part or that part with a specific audience. But just, step back and look at all these things that I had been kind of talking about over the years and try to comprehensively organize it into one thing was challenging, but very fun.
So what is it exactly? Is it kind of like an iTunes U, where it's just going to be a series of videos that you can watch online, or what's the format like?
Yeah, it is. It's like, I think about 20 lessons. Each one's about half an hour-ish, 20 minutes, 15, depending. But, it's pretty deep in terms of, I try to go into the fundamentals of what I see as game design, but a lot of it really is player psychology. How players think, how you motivate them, how you, tweak little parts of their brain. Some of it is on things like prototyping. There's a section on system dynamics and basically how you can build emergent systems, with under various paradigms like network theory or cellular automata or system dynamics, that kind of stuff. So it gets pretty in depth.
I'd imagine this does feel like writing a book.
Yeah, I mean, it was in terms of the way I would outline it. Yeah. So, I had to step back and say, okay, what's the right material to present? What's the order to present it in? And then how deep you go in each section.
Yeah. Does it feel like writing some of your classic speeches from the past, just getting back into that groove?
Yeah. I was actually looking back at a lot of my speeches and trying to pull out the things that all kind of work together. And, having to step back and organize it all as one whole thing made me kind of rethink a lot of it. There's this old saying that to really understand something, you have to teach it. And I think it's very true.
Yeah, it's like it's the equivalent of like proxy, I'd imagine, going back to your old speeches and figuring out the connections in your own life of like, here's a good point. Here's a good point.
Right. Here's how I think about it, really,
Yeah. Were you able to connect to those old speeches when you watch, your history in video? Are you ever shocked about like, I can't believe I cared so much about this back then, or things that really stood out to you?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, it's always just kind of weird hearing your voice recorded or seeing yourself on film. It's kind of uncomfortable for me, so I usually don't go back and look at those.
I'm sure, I don't want this to be just a full ass-kiss rodeo, but you're well right, so you have to kiss a little bit of ass here. But we had Ocean Quigley on a couple years ago on this podcast, and he was absolutely great. And he was talking about my favorite thought coming from you originally, just about the idea of thinking about physics as the compression algorithm for the universe. Yeah. And then having game design be the exact opposite, where you're writing code to hopefully expand into the entire universe. That might be the smartest thought that's ever been thought on planet Earth. So congratulations. Do you still think about that a lot?
Well, yeah, I mean, to me, that was actually part of the lessons. For me, in aesthetic, one of the questions they asked me, what was my favorite game, which actually is the game Go, the board game Go. And it's primarily because for such a simple rule set, it has the most complex strategy. So the ratio between the complexity of the rules versus the strategy that comes out of it is, it's a huge ratio compared to any other game. And, to me, that's emergence. And that's one of the things that I think the game designers need to learn to discover. It's not really, emergence isn't something you engineer, it's something you really have to kind of discover.
Yeah. So were you compelled to do this masterclass? Because I'd imagine a lot of people are reaching out to you saying, Will Wright, please come give a presentation at our studio. Please help us. Do you have any advice in the game industry? Is this just like, do you see it as the one-stop shop for whenever anybody wants something in the future, wants to pick your brain in the future, just say, hey, just watch this masterclass?
Well, that wasn't the reason, but I think the attraction and challenge for me was, could I take all this material and bring it into a cohesive whole, And as I thought about that, I was actually found the challenge very entertaining. So that's what really attracted me to doing it.
Yeah, just compressing your life and everything you've learned.
Yeah, and again, as I did that, I think I learned a lot, just by the fact that I had to kind of format and sort and categorize all this material.
Yeah, yeah. Can you, do you think you can teach anybody how to be a great game designer?
No.
Okay, what does it take?
I wish I could. Well, I think to be a good game designer, you first have to be a good designer. And I think game design is possibly one of the most challenging design fields that there is. And I don't think everybody really has, the same kind of mindset to be a good designer. Some people do, some people don't. But, for somebody who's a good designer, I think you could teach them to become a great game designer, yes.
Simple question. What do you mean by designer? What falls under that umbrella in your mind?
Well, I think the best definition I heard was actually from Charles Eames, from the Charles and Ray Eames team. He said design is constraint. And, he just meant that, once you have a set of constraints, design is how you maximize what you're doing within those constraints. And, the constraints could be technical, they could be psychological, they could be marketing or economic. But a designer can take kind of any problem, with a set of constraints and say, okay, how do I maximize my result within those constraints? And, how can I be, creative and unique and do something that nobody's done before within the same constraints that hundreds or thousands of other people have operated underneath?
Yeah. Do you get that thrill working on a game like Proxy of just being thrown back into the peak of your game design skills?
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's, like Proxy and a lot of my other games, it was the subject that grabbed me. I'm very interested in, psychology and subconscious. And it was like, okay, how can I kind of use this format of gaming to dive into that, investigate it, learn about it?
Do you ever want to work with other teams again, working on maybe more standard games, less psychological games?
I don't know. I mean, I'm enjoying what I'm doing right now, and it's just kind of like the path that my career has taken me to, and I'm not quite sure where it's going to go from there. Yeah,
people aren't banging on your door asking you to do a Kickstarter or something like that.
Well, people send me a lot of emails asking for this, that, and the other, but I, kind of follow my own compass.
Yeah. What do you get asked the most?
Oh, I do get asked to give a lot of talks. I mean, that's probably the most frequent one.
Okay. And do you enjoy doing those?
Yeah. I mean, especially if it's to a group I've never talked to before, because then I have to kind of rethink. I gave a talk several years ago to a U.S. Army symposium.
Oh, wow.
And it was interesting because it was all like, officers in the Army, in the military. So most of the talk ended up being the history of military wargaming, which I enjoyed researching. And, it turned out the armies of the world, were some of the first people to realize how educational games could be, and use them for that purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so going back to just training people to be a good game designer. So you have to be a good designer, then you become a good game designer. I'm wondering, is a big lesson for you just sticking with it? Like when we talked to Ocean Quigley years ago, he said, and with all due respect, he said, all of Will's ideas sound terrible, and you never know if they're terribly brilliant or terrible. And you said, is that part of the job, is just coming up with an idea and then just riding it through no matter where it goes?
Well, I mean, some ideas, you get partway in and start realizing it actually is just a terrible idea. And it's a matter of, cutting your losses early and going on to something else. But even during the design process, we do a lot of prototyping of ideas that might be within a game. we're going, down this big branching tree, and every time we get to a fork in the road, we have to decide if we're going to go, left or right. And a lot of times we'll build a prototype and play with it and say, okay, left is not the way to go. We're going to go right. So failure is part of the design process, and it's a matter of how to use failure as a tool, not to treat failure as something bad.
Yeah, yeah. And like The Sims as an example, I mean, you must have just been working on that for so long. Ocean even said that you were going solo for a long time, just in the idea of, I know there's an idea here, I just need to keep plowing ahead.
Yeah, and a lot of it, was internal to me, figuring out where to go down that design tree. And there was a lot of failure along there. But, I think some of the very best ideas, the reason why a lot of other people haven't come up with some of these unique ideas is because it took a lot of failure to get there.
Yeah, and people are just scared of failure, too scared of failure?
Yeah, and also the persistence of it. I mean, just software development in general, a lot of times it feels like you're 90% done, but really you're halfway done, and if you've ever done software development, it feels just like that. You think you're almost done when you're halfway through. And so you really have to have a lot of kind of determination to get through that second half.
Yeah. We were just at the Strong Museum of Play in New York not too long ago, and there they have something amazing, which is your notebooks from your time at Maxis. And that's an amazing way to leaf through essentially your brain and figure out exactly how many ideas you're dealing with. Is that, I'd imagine that's a very personal thing. That must be bizarre for a museum to have all of your notebooks.
I was going to just throw them away, and they asked if I had stuff like that, and turns out I did, and I just gave them to them. I didn't even really look at them that much, because once I use these notebooks, I just put them aside. I don't go back and refer to them. It's more just my thought process, on the way there. Yeah,
going through them, and we have a video on the site showing some pages off as well, but it's amazing just how all over the place they are. How it really, they even brought up that it's like the most intricate Sims brainstorming session, and then it is your grocery list, and then it's like, hey, I got to remember to call Ted Price back. Here's his cell phone number, that type of thing. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like stream of consciousness, but I'm usually like juggling 4 or 5 things all at once, kind of multitasking my head. Yeah. And if I put it on paper, it helps me kind of keep track of, that's this, that's that, I was amazed, and you probably don't even remember how much you were into this, but for the Sims design, the early phases in those notebooks, it's like page after page of just astrology breakdown and astrology charts. Were you really into astrology back then? No, actually, I can tell you what I was doing is that I wanted to have the astrology in the Sims be empirical. Okay. In other words, I actually took these different personality types in the Sims, put them together, and saw which ones got along well. And, basically mapped it to the real astrology signs. So, they'll say that, Capricorn gets well with Taurus or something like that. In The Sims, I found out that these two types get together, and also, they'll describe, Taurus is like this, that, and the other, Aquarius is like that. And so I roughly mapped the Sims' personalities into those zodiac signs. Then I tested them empirically to see which ones actually got along the best. And so I actually wanted to have something like astrology, but actually based on actual data. And did you learn anything about the entire system? Well, it was interesting to me, and this is a little harder to describe, that, you're dealing with like the Sims, the original Sims had 5, 6 personality dimensions. So you can think of that as a 6-dimensional space. And these are clusters within that space. That space is subdivided. I basically had to subdivide that 6-dimensional space into 12 equally sized regions. And okay, this gets into geeky math stuff. Love it. For me, aesthetically, it was very interesting to take a 6-dimensional space, divide it into 12 equal regions, and then figure out which ones were had borders with each other and how large the area of the borders were. And I'm not even going to go any further because this is kind of like math aesthetics for me. How do you? But I enjoyed that whole process in my own head. It's nothing I would really expect anybody else to enjoy, but I really enjoyed, visualizing all this. Why do you think you enjoy that? I know it's like asking Will Wright why he's Will Wright, but like, what do you think led to your brain being fascinated by that type of thing? I'm not sure. I've always been very visual, and I actually never had much of an interest in math until I realized that I could take almost any math and make it geometry. Interesting. And once I could convert it to geometry and visualize it, it all made perfect sense to me.
And so I, over the years, got better and better at taking any kind of form of math and figuring out how to make it spatial and visual.
Yeah. Have you wanted to do more work, or would you be interested in the future in doing more work in kind of I hate to say edutainment, but gamifying education?
Yeah, well, I mean, kind of what I'm working on now. I want people to learn. I like books, movies, whatever. The best ones are ones that after you see them, you kind of see your life differently, see the world differently. They make they add something to your toolbox of perception. So I guess it's fundamental. You call it educational.
Yeah. What do you think are the most important books in your life? If you had to give a couple recommendations off the top of your head that have really shaped your path.
Probably the biggest one, the only book I've read more than 10 times, was Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
Oh, interesting. Okay. What is it about that one?
Well, I think I read that, in my early teens, and the gist of the book, that I got, was that there is like no correct way of seeing the world. Each one has its strengths, and he's kind of counterposing holistic Zen Eastern thought with much more scientific, rigorous, analytical Western thought. And he uses a motorcycle as an example to if you want to fix a motorcycle, Zen meditation is not going to help you a whole lot. But when you're riding a motorcycle on a summer day, out and the wind blowing through your hair, that's a holistic experience. And to really get the most out of it, you want more of a Zen mentality. And so he's showing that for anything in life, there are all these different kind of ways in which you could see it, understand it. And, that had a big impact on me, kind of realizing that there's no one way of seeing the world is correct. No one philosophy is correct. No one religion is correct. That they're all tools. And actually you want a bunch of these at any point and use them, for their strengths.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's all you need to know. When you look back on your career, is there a certain era that you think about the most, a certain project or certain time in your life that you keep reflecting on these days?
Well, maybe a little bit more of the early stuff, because now I'm working with a small team again.
Okay.
And, it's starting to feel more like, after I'd been in the industry for just 5 years, it was still a young industry. The teams were small, we could do anything we wanted to. And, I actually enjoy the fact that it kind of feels nostalgic.
Is it a younger team that you're working with? Does that help feel that?
Yeah, they're fairly young.
Okay.
Several, but some older people I've worked with for many years. And there's, something, when you work on a huge team, like over 100 people, there's so much management involved, and I found that on a small team, we spend about 3 hours working individually for every maybe 1 hour we meet. On a large team, like for SPORE, we'd easily spend 3 hours meeting for every 1 hour we worked, so it was inverted. And I'd much rather, the 3 hours of work and 1 hour of meetings.
Yeah. It seemed like from reading about your life, it seemed like Sims Online was another one of those huge jumps, right? Where that was a huge team for you to operate with back then.
Yeah. The Sims Online and SPORE were the two biggest teams I ever worked with.
Oh man, what do you think about when you look back on the Sims Online chapter? It's such an oddball in the industry.
Yeah, I learned a lot from that. It was what I would probably term as a glorious failure. There were just a couple things that we couldn't quite get to that I think would have made the difference. But on the other hand, those games, it's almost like you're investing half of your life. If it's successful, you're going to be running that thing for years and years and years. So it's kind of bittersweet, I guess.
Yeah. What do you think did you have any epiphanies after you released the game about how you could have cracked it a little bit more efficiently?
I think we needed a lot more customization tools in there where players could customize objects and stuff and have some economy there. That's the whole layer that I think was missing.
Okay. Was it a stressful project? Was EA really the Eye of Sauron looking at you guys for that one?
It was stressful for me just because of the size of the team. It was a team over 100 people. And it was, for me, just kind of working in that big of an environment with that much management overhead was kind of stressful. It wasn't like EA pressuring, that kind of thing. In fact, I think that they were a little more upbeat about it. I was a little more skeptical the whole time, thinking it's not quite ready. But yeah, that's a whole nother story.
Yeah. And then it seems like, at least from the outside perspective, not playing it, everyone just said, "Oh, isn't that just like the weird game that turned into a sex chat room within 14 minutes after it was released?"
Yeah. Once you kind of give a game like that to the fans, they take it where they take it. And
Is that the day when you learned, like, oh, the internet's for sex these days? Why didn't I think of that? Of course.
And cats.
Okay, sex and cats. It never connected. Just
Yeah.
what is that like to be on the Sims Online team when you start to realize, like, oh, this is just going a direction that we did not expect?
Well, it's like you have to always decide, okay, how much control are we giving to the players and how much are we try to retain? You know, if you try to retain too much control, you know, it just kind of evaporates, it dies on its own. All the really, really cool, thriving communities online were ones where the players, users, you know, kind of basically crafted and created what it became.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like Frankenstein. You flip the switch, you know, the monster gets up off the table and goes where it wants to go.
In this place, yeah, it's behind the beaded curtain, I think, in the video rental place. Yeah, I get it. So at a certain point, you just have to roll with it. Of like, all right, look, EA, I know it went this direction, but we have to make the best of this.
That's how the monster went to Amsterdam. I don't care. You know?
And then eventually it became EA Land, like they rebranded it.
I'm not sure what I didn't even really follow it that much. I know some of the Sims Online team went off and they started another online thing, Churnia. A friend of mine, Luke Bartley, was running that for a while.
Okay, gotcha. Cool. So it reminds you of the early days working in this stage in your career. That's nice.
Yeah.
It's keeping you fresh, keeping you young, huh?
Well, kind of, yeah. Well, it wears me out.
Yeah. I feel like, again, I just want to stress, I feel like we want your voice in the game industry more. It's been a while. I don't know if that means you should start up a podcast, do more interviews. I don't know how you get out there, but there's so many things that's like, oh, we've been dying to ask you. Like, did you follow No Man's Sky's development at all? Did you have any thoughts on that game?
I followed a little bit. I actually downloaded it and tried it for a while. I mean, I understand the path they took, you know, because it was so similar to Spore. It was interesting they tried to gamify it a little, you know, in a different direction. It was, I didn't, you know, I found some of the worlds kind of interesting, kind of visually, but I didn't play, you know, I've actually had a lot more fun. You know, what's been far more addictive to me is Google Earth and VR on the Vive.
Interesting. Because it gets to the same idea, right? If you just want to gamify Religious Epiphany, which you're trying to do with Spore as well. But that's basically it, right?
Yeah, well, I got a Vive a while back. You know, I've been playing a lot of VR stuff. And the only two things that really stick with me are Universe Simulator and Google Earth. Those are the two I keep coming back to and I love playing with.
Do you feel like they need to be gamified at all? Or it's like, hey, that's good. Just leave it a little sandbox.
Oh, Google Earth is fine. You know, for me, it's just a sandbox. And I think of things to go, places to go, you know, different ways to look at things. Universe Sandbox, you know, is really just a simulation with a lot of tools. And it's, you know, when you get in there, you just kind of feel like you're in a god or something, you know, throwing planets at each other and watching things collide. And it's beautiful.
That's
know?
all you need for empowering gamers. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
That's absolutely everything. Okay, last random question. Do you have any thoughts on Mr. Right in Smash, Super Smash Brothers? He's been going so strong for all these years. Do you ever think about that?
Occasionally. I mean, it's an honor. When Nintendo, I first started working at Nintendo way back on the early NES, they did the very first SimCity. And Miyamoto-san asked me, you know, if you would mind if they named the guy with the green hair, Dr. Wright, you know, the guy who kind of gives you the help. And, you know, I was honored back then because Miyamoto, you know, is actually got to be the best game designer ever and also a good friend.
Oh, that's so sweet. I mean, do you still communicate with Miyamoto?
I haven't talked to him in a while, but anytime I get the opportunity, yeah, and I spend a fair amount of time in Japan with him.
What do you think is so brilliant about him? What have you learned throughout all of your experience with him where you say, this is it. This is the secret to his genius?
I think Miyamoto never lost his childhood, you know? And it's not like he remembers his childhood. It's like he kept it with him, you know? So a good bit of him is still, you know, this 6-year-old boy playing in the garden. And you see that when you talk to him and just the way he approaches the world. And I think that's his most valuable asset.
That's amazing. Do you still have that youthful energy? Do you still have a 6-year-old's brain at all?
Well, I have an 8-year-old, which helps me, you know, see the world through those eyes a lot, you know, and I have to kind of sit down and just kind of get myself in his mindset and say, okay, wow, I see why he's so into this.
Yeah, you see why Minecraft is a phenomenon.
Yeah, exactly.
That's perfect. Well, hey, the masterclass, people just Google that and then sign up. It costs money. How does this work?
Yeah, actually, it's fairly expensive. It's like $90 for one course or $180 for all the courses. And but the quality of the courses is extraordinary. And you have to kind of just go on their site and see what's available there. But and I think they have previews and stuff that you can kind of check out if you really want to do it or not.
Okay, fantastic. Well, hey, anything else you'd like to say?
No, it's pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, I think we got it. Just on behalf of everybody in the world, I want to say thank you, Will Wright. Thank you for your hard work throughout all of your years, man. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Good talking with you.
That was just a clip from a larger show called The Game Informer Show. You can find it on iTunes, Google Play, or GameInformer.com. We take the fun opportunities and exclusive information from Game Informer magazine and boil it into a show that airs every Thursday with exclusive cover story information, developer interviews, a lot of fun stuff. So come love games with us.